We can negotiate. This device is the key.
His four eyes focused on the human below. The metal was cold against his chin and his body, but he didn't move. He couldn't afford to. Not yet. This was what he did best. Waiting, watching, striking when the moment was perfect. 17 kills. That was his record. 17 targets across 9 different star systems, and not one of them had seen him coming. Not the corrupt senator on Valoria Prime. Not the weapons dealer on the ice moon of Therax. Not even an enhanced security officer on Station Kepler 9, who supposedly had sensors that could detect a heartbeat through solid steel. Crothar had killed them all, and he'd done it without leaving a trace. This job should have been no different, maybe even easier. Ambassador Jake Morrison sat at his desk 3 meters below, his eyes scanning through holographic documents that floated in the air before him. Trade agreements, from what Crothar could see. Boring human paperwork. The kind of stuff that made the assassin's job almost feel like a mercy killing. At least death would be more interesting than whatever the human was reading. Jake looked ordinary. Painfully ordinary. Short brown hair. Plain features. Wearing a simple gray suit that probably cost less than the data chip Crothar carried. Nothing about him screamed dangerous. Nothing suggested he was worth the massive payment sitting in Crothar's encrypted account. 20,000 galactic credits. That was serious money. The kind of money that meant someone very powerful wanted this human gone. The contract details had been clear and simple. Eliminate Ambassador Jake Morrison before the vote tomorrow morning. The vote on the contested territories, a chunk of space that 3 different species claimed as their own. With the human gone, the Earth delegation would probably withdraw. They were new to the Galactic Council. After all, still trying to prove themselves. Still trying to fit in. Without their ambassador, they'd likely back down, go home, and let the big players handle things. At least, that's what Crothar's employers were counting on. He'd done his research, of course. Professionals always did. Jake Morrison, age 37, originally from somewhere called Texas on Earth. Former military, but that was years ago. Now just a diplomat. A talker. Someone who solved problems with words instead of weapons. He lived alone in these quarters on the diplomatic station. No guards posted outside. No visible security measures. No weapons that Crothar scanners could detect. The galaxy had been buzzing with warnings about humans lately. Ever since Earth had joined the Council 2 years ago, there had been talk. Whispers in the darker corners of space stations and trading posts. Don't underestimate them, people said. They're more dangerous than they look. Some claimed humans were crazy, that they'd gone to war with each other for thousands of years over the stupidest reasons. Others said they were unpredictable, that they'd befriend you one moment and stab you the next. Crothar thought it was all nonsense. Propaganda, probably. Every species thought they were special, thought they were the toughest ones in the galaxy. But when you strip away the stories and the legends, everyone died the same way. Quick and quiet, if you knew what you were doing. And Crothar definitely knew what he was doing. He'd been watching Jake for 20 minutes now, studying his patterns. The human had barely moved. He'd shifted in his chair twice, rubbed his eyes once, taken a sip from a cup of something hot. That was probably coffee. Humans love their coffee. But other than that, nothing. No suspicious glances toward the ventilation grate. No nervous movements. No sign whatsoever that he knew death was literally hanging above his head. Perfect. Crothar's hand moved slowly to the weapon mounted on his forearm, the molecular blade. It was a beautiful piece of technology, banned in most systems because of how deadly it was. The edge was only 1 molecule thick, sharp enough to cut through reinforced steel like it was paper, sharp enough to slice through flesh and bone before the victim even felt pain. 1 quick strike to the neck, and it would be over. Jake Morrison would be dead before his brain even registered what had happened. The assassin calculated the distance, the angle, the exact trajectory he'd need. Drop straight down, blade extended, strike the left side of the neck where the major artery was. Gravity would do most of the work. He'd done this 100 times in training, 17 times for real. Muscle memory. Easy. He tensed his legs, ready to drop through the grate. That's when Jake spoke. You know, I've been expecting you. Crothar froze. Every muscle in his body locked up. His four hearts, which usually beat in perfect synchronized rhythm, suddenly hammered against his ribs in confused chaos. The human's voice had been calm, casual, like he was commenting on the weather, but he hadn't looked up. Jake was still staring at his holographic documents, still sitting in that same relaxed position. Maybe Crothar had imagined it. Maybe the stress of the job was getting to him. That had never happened before, but there was always a first time. Then Jake spoke again. "I've been watching you watch me for about 20 minutes now," the human said, his tone almost conversational. "You've been very patient, very professional. I respect that, honestly. Most of the others were a lot sloppier." This time, Jake did look up. His eyes found the ventilation grate immediately, found Crothar crouching in the shadows behind it, and his face wore an expression that Crothar's translator implant couldn't quite identify. It wasn't fear. It definitely wasn't surprise. It was something else. Something that made the assassin's instincts scream danger. "Come on down," Jake said, leaning back in his chair. He looked relaxed. Too relaxed. "Let's get this over with. I've got an early morning tomorrow, and I'd really like to get some sleep." Crothar's mind raced. This was impossible. His stealth field was military-grade, top-of-the-line technology. It bent light around him, masked his heat signature, even dampened sound. There was no way the human should have been able to detect him. No possible way. Unless this was a bluff. Yes, that had to be it. The human suspected someone might come for him. So he was talking to empty air, hoping to spook an assassin that might not even be there. Classic paranoia. But those eyes. Jake was looking right at him, right at the exact spot where Crothar was hiding. The assassin's training kicked in, overriding his confusion. It didn't matter if the human knew he was there. Surprise was nice, but it wasn't necessary. Crothar still had every advantage. He was enhanced. Trained since hatching, armed with a weapon that could cut through anything. The human was sitting in a chair, unarmed, with nowhere to run. This changed nothing. Crothar's combat instincts took control of his body before his conscious mind could even finish processing what was happening. 20 years of training, thousands of hours spent practicing the perfect kill, all of it compressed into a single moment of action. His legs released their grip on the ventilation shaft, and he dropped. The grate above him gave way with barely a whisper of sound. His body fell in complete silence, a shadow dropping from above. The molecular blade extended from his forearm in one smooth motion, the impossibly thin edge catching the light for just a fraction of a second. Beautiful, deadly, aimed directly at Jake Morrison's throat. 3 meters. 2 meters. 1. The strike was perfect. Crothar had done this exact maneuver dozens of times. The angle was right. The speed was right. Everything was right. In his mind, he was already planning his exit route, already thinking about how he'd slip back through the station's maintenance corridors and disappear before anyone even found the body. Then Jake moved, not with the jerky panic of prey realizing it was about to die, not with the clumsy desperation of someone trying to survive. The human moved like water, like smoke, like he'd known exactly where the blade would be and had already decided not to be there anymore. He rolled backward over his chair in a motion so fluid it looked almost lazy, and Crothar's blade sliced through the space where his neck had been a heartbeat before. Empty air. The assassin had cut nothing but empty air. Crothar landed in a low crouch where Jake had been sitting, his blade still extended, his mind trying to catch up with what had just happened. That shouldn't have been possible. Humans weren't that fast. Their reaction times were average at best according to every database he'd checked. They were persistence hunters, not quick-strike predators. They weren't supposed to be able to dodge like that. He spun around, already calculating his second attack. Jake was now standing between his desk and the back wall, about 2 meters away. The human's hands were empty. His suit wasn't even wrinkled from that roll. He looked calm, too calm, like this was all going exactly how he'd expected it to. "Good technique," Jake said, and his voice had that same casual tone, like they were discussing sports instead of attempted murder. "Clean entry, perfect silence, excellent strike angle. You're definitely a professional." Crothar didn't respond. Talking during a kill was sloppy, unprofessional. He analyzed a new situation instead. Jake was cornered now, trapped between the desk and the wall. The room wasn't large, maybe 4 meters by 5 meters. There was a door on the far wall, but it was sealed. The human would have to go through Crawdar to reach it, and there was nowhere else to run. This was actually better than the original plan. The human was standing now, which meant Crawdar could use his full range of attacks. Ground fighting, aerial strikes, grappling moves. He had options. Jake Morrison was a dead man. It would just take a few seconds longer than expected. Your attempt number 12 this year, by the way, Jake said conversationally. He started reaching into his jacket pocket, moving slowly like he didn't want to startle anyone. 12 different assassins in 9 months. At first, we thought it was just bad luck. You know, Earth being new to the Council, making enemies without meaning to. But after number 3, we started to realize this was going to be a pattern. Crawdar watched the human's hand disappear into his pocket. A weapon? Possible, but unlikely. His scanners hadn't detected anything. Still, he tensed, ready to strike the moment Jake pulled out whatever he was reaching for. So we made some adjustments. Jake continued. Crawdar didn't wait to find out what those adjustments were. He launched himself forward, his blade leading the way in a strike pattern designed to leave absolutely no room for escape. High, low, middle. 3 strikes in under a second, each one targeting a vital area. It was a killing sequence that had never failed him. Jake pulled something from his pocket. A pen. Just an ordinary writing pen. The cheap kind that came in packs of 10 at office supply stores. Blue plastic, silver clip. Completely unremarkable. The human raised that pen and deflected the molecular blade. The sound that resulted was wrong. All wrong. It should have been the soft whisper of the blade slicing through plastic, like it wasn't even there. Instead, it was a sharp metallic clang, like steel hitting steel. The vibration ran up Crawdar's arm, shocking him so much he almost dropped his guard. The pen hadn't broken. It hadn't even been scratched. Carbon nanotube composite, Jake explained, holding up the pen like he was showing off a new toy. NASA developed the formula about 15 years ago. Stronger than steel, lighter than plastic. We've been putting it in everything lately. Crawdar struck again, faster this time. The blade should cut through anything. Anything. That was the whole point of molecular edge technology. But when it hit the pen for the second time, that same metallic ring echoed through the room, and the pen remained intact. My desk, Jake said, tapping the furniture beside him with his free hand. Reinforced. The chair? Reinforced. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, even that little coffee cup over there. All of it. This entire room is basically one big defensive position now. Crawdar's mind raced. This was supposed to be simple. In and out, quick and clean. But nothing about this was going according to plan. He needed to adapt, to change tactics. The blade wasn't working. Fine. He had other weapons. He triggered the dart launcher in his left wrist gauntlet. 6 poison-tipped projectiles shot out in a spread pattern, too fast for the human eye to track. Each dart carried enough toxin to drop a creature twice Jake's size. It was overkill, really, but Crawdar was past caring about elegance. Jake dug behind his desk. The darts hit the wall where he'd been standing, and instead of sticking into the surface, they shattered, just broke apart like they'd hit solid steel instead of standard station wall material. Yeah, reinforce that too. Jake's voice came from behind the desk. The human popped back up a second later, now holding a datapad like it was a shield. Transparent aluminum facing on this. By the way, that's not technically aluminum anymore. It's just what we still call it. Alone, actually. Aluminum oxynitride. Anyway, it'll stop pretty much anything you've got. Crawdar heard something then. A mechanical sound. Multiple mechanical sounds, actually. Soft whirring noises coming from different directions. Wall panels slid open. 4 of them, positioned at different corners of the room. Behind each panel was an automated defense turret, sleek and black, and very clearly military-grade hardware. They swiveled smoothly, tracking Crawdar's position with mechanical precision. Red targeting lasers painted dots across his chest and head. The assassin froze. These were serious weapons. Point defense systems, probably loaded with armor-piercing rounds. At this range, they could turn him into a cloud of vapor in under a second. All 4 of them were aimed at him, locked on, ready to fire. But they didn't fire. They just tracked him, following every tiny movement he made. "Those aren't here to kill you," Jake said. He set down the data pad and the pen, then brushed some invisible dust off his suit jacket. "I mean, they could, definitely could, but that's not what they're for." Crothar's 4 eyes darted between the turrets, looking for any opening, any possible escape route. There wasn't one. The moment he moved, the moment he tried to run or attack or do anything, those turrets would cut him down. "They're here to make sure you don't accidentally hurt yourself trying to escape," Jake continued. "Because what happens next needs you alive and conscious. Well, mostly conscious. A little brain damage is probably fine." The door to the quarters opened with a soft hiss. Crothar's head snapped toward the sound, hope briefly flaring in his chest. Maybe it was station security. Maybe they'd interrupt this insanity, and he could slip away in the confusion. 3 humans walked in, 2 men and 1 woman, all of them tall and powerfully built. They wore matching black training clothes, the kind designed for physical exercise. No armor, no weapons. They looked like they'd just come from a gym, and all 3 of them were smiling. The 3 humans walked into the room like they owned the place. Actually, Crothar thought they probably did own it in some legal sense, since this was a human diplomatic quarters. But that wasn't the point. The point was the way they moved. Relaxed, confident, not the careful tension of soldiers entering a combat zone, but the easy swagger of people who knew exactly what they were doing and weren't worried about it. 2 men and 1 woman. The first man was huge, maybe 2 meters tall with shoulders that looked like they could carry a small vehicle. Dark skin, shaved head, arms covered in old scars that suggested he'd been in plenty of fights before. The woman was shorter but still tall by human standards, with red hair pulled back in a tight braid, and the kind of lean muscle that came from years of serious training. The second man was somewhere in between, average height, but built like a compact freight hauler, with the kind of frame that suggested explosive power. None of them wore armor. None of them carried weapons. They were dressed in simple black training clothes, the kind of stuff humans wore when they went to those gym facilities Crowther had read about. Comfortable, flexible, designed for movement. And all 3 of them were looking at him like he was the most interesting thing they'd seen all week. Jake stepped away from his desk, brushing off his suit one more time like appearance mattered at a moment like this. His whole demeanor changed. The casual, almost joking tone was gone. Now he stood straighter, spoke more formally, like he was in some kind of official proceeding. "Crothar the Velkerry Shadow Clans," Jake said, and hearing his full clan name from a human's mouth was somehow more disturbing than anything else that had happened so far. "You entered my quarters without permission. You attempted to take my life using lethal force. In doing so, you invoked Article 47 of the Galactic Assassination Accords." Crothar's blood went cold, colder than it already was. Anyway, the Assassination Accords were old laws, written back when the galaxy was a rougher place, and political murder was just another tool of diplomacy. Most civilized species didn't even acknowledge them anymore, but they were still technically legal, still binding under Galactic Council law. Article 47 was the part that made sanctioned assassination legal under specific circumstances. Political targets, certain types of contracts, proper documentation. If you followed the rules, you could kill someone and walk away clean. Crothar had followed those rules. He always followed the rules. That's what made him a professional instead of just a common murderer. "You failed," Jake continued, and there was something almost sympathetic in his voice now. "Your attempt was unsuccessful. I'm still alive. You're still in my quarters." Which brings us to Article 48. Article 48. Crothar knew it, of course. Every assassin knew it. But nobody actually used Article 48. It was a relic, a piece of ancient history that existed on paper, but never happened in real life. In the entire time Crothar had been operating, across 17 successful contracts and hundreds of research hours, he'd never heard a single case where Article 48 had been invoked. Article 48 states that if an assassination attempt fails and the target survives, that target has the right to challenge the assassin to trial by combat. Jake said. He was reciting it from memory, word for word. The terms of combat are determined by the target. The location is determined by the target. And the consequences are determined by the target. The automated turrets were still tracking Crawdar. The 3 humans in training clothes were still watching him. And Jake was still talking in that formal, official tone that made everything feel like a legal proceeding instead of the disaster it actually was. I invoke Article 48, Jake said. Trial by combat. My terms. Crawdar's confidence, which had already taken several serious hits tonight, cracked right down the middle. This couldn't be happening. Article 48 was ancient. It came from a time when honor and personal combat meant something, before modern weapons and long-range assassination made everything clean and distant. Nobody used it anymore, because it was insane, primitive, a throwback to an era the galaxy had moved past. The terms are as follows, Jake continued. Unarmed combat, human style, specifically mixed martial arts, which is a combat system developed on Earth combining techniques from multiple fighting disciplines. You'll face my security detail one at a time. 3 opponents total. Each match will be 3 rounds of 5 minutes each. Standard rules apply. No biting, no eye gouging, no strikes to the back of the head. Everything else is fair game. The big human with the shaved head cracked his knuckles. The sound echoed in the small room like breaking bones. If you win, Jake said, you go free. We delete all records of this incident. We call a professional disagreement and part ways. No charges, no pursuit, no bounty. You walk out of here and we never speak of this again. That actually sounded reasonable. Crawdar was enhanced, genetically modified from hatching to be faster, stronger, more resilient than baseline members of his species. He'd been trained in 17 different combat systems. He had 4 arms to their 2, compound eyes that could track multiple targets simultaneously, and an exoskeleton that could take punishment that would shatter human bones. 3 humans, unarmed, one at a time. Even if they were trained, even if they were good, the physical advantages alone should be enough. And if you lose, Jake continued, you tell us who hired you, full details, names, payment methods, contact protocols, everything. Then we turn you over to council authorities and let them handle it through proper legal channels. This is madness, Crawdar hissed. His translator made the sound come out harsh and sharp, alien. I am genetically enhanced. Trained since hatching in combat systems, your species has never even heard of. I am a Velkari Shadow Clan warrior. We have been perfecting the art of killing for 4,000 years. That's cute, the woman with red hair said. She had an accent Crawdar's translator identified as coming from somewhere called Australia. For 1,000 years. That's adorable. We've been killing each other for a lot longer than that, the big man added. His voice was deep, rumbling like distant thunder. Couple million years. Give or take. Started with rocks and sticks. Got more creative from there. Jake held up a hand, and the other 2 humans went quiet immediately. The ambassador took a step closer to Crawdar, close enough that the assassin could have struck him if the turrets weren't still tracking every movement. Here's the thing you need to understand about humans, Jake said quietly. We're not the strongest species in the galaxy. We're not the fastest. We're not the smartest, though we're working on that. But we spent more time fighting each other than most species have spent existing. We had wars that killed millions. We've developed hundreds of different ways to hurt each other, and we've gotten very, very good at all of them. The ambassador's face changed then. That expression Crawdar's translator couldn't identify earlier suddenly became crystal clear. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It wasn't even really aggression. It was anticipation, excitement, the look of someone who'd been waiting for something and was genuinely happy. It was finally happening. Jake smiled, really smiled, and Crawdar finally understood what he was looking at. The human wasn't scared, wasn't worried, wasn't even particularly concerned about having an assassin in his quarters. He was looking forward to this. He wanted this to happen. Maybe had been hoping for it. The difference between you and us, Jake said, still smiling, is that you were bred for this. Modified, enhanced, trained. You're a weapon someone else made. But we evolved into this. Naturally, we climbed our way up from the bottom of the food chain by being better at violence than everything else on our planet. And our planet had some seriously violent stuff on it. The woman started doing stretches, preparing her muscles. The second man rolled his shoulders, working out some stiffness. The big guy just stood there, still smiling, still looking at Crowther like he was a present someone had wrapped up special. We joined the Galactic Council because we chose peace, Jake continued, not because we couldn't handle war. We've had enough war to last us a few lifetimes. But just because we chose peace doesn't mean we forgot how to fight. He stepped back, gesturing toward the three humans in training clothes. So here's your choice, Crowther. You can accept the terms of Article 48, fight this out clean and legal, and maybe walk away from this. Or you can refuse, and those turrets stop being just for show. Either way, this ends tonight. Crowther looked at the turrets, still tracking him, still ready to fire. He looked at the three humans, now warming up like this was some kind of sporting event. He looked at Jake, still wearing that smile that said he knew exactly how this was going to end. The assassin had walked into this room thinking he had all the advantages. Now he wasn't sure he had any. The big man stepped forward first. He was massive up close, easily the largest of the three humans. His name was Derek, and he moved to the center of the small room like he'd done this 1,000 times before, which Crowther realized with growing dread he probably had. 5-minute rounds, Jake said from the side of the room, holding up a small timer. 3 rounds total. Ready when you are. Crowther sized up his opponent. Derek was big, yes, but size meant slow. That was basic physics. More mass meant more inertia, which meant slower reaction times. The human had muscle, sure, but Crowther had 4 arms, superior reach, and an exoskeleton that could absorb impacts that would shatter human ribs. This should still be manageable. The assassin settled into a fighting stance, distributing his weight evenly across his 4 legs. He'd trained in Valkyrie combat arts since he was old enough to walk. 17 different martial systems, each one designed to maximize his species' natural advantages. Speed, multiple limbs, compound vision that could track threats from multiple angles simultaneously. Begin, Jake said simply. Crowther struck first, as he'd been trained to do. Establish dominance early. Show your opponent they're outmatched. His upper right arm shot out in a lightning-fast jab aimed at Derek's throat. A killing blow, or at least it would have been if his blade was still extended. Without it, he'd settle for crushing the human's windpipe. Derek moved. The human didn't just dodge. He slipped the strike, turning his body sideways, so Crowther's fist passed within centimeters of his neck without connecting. At the same time, Derek's hand came up and grabbed Crowther's extended arm at the wrist, using the assassin's own momentum against him. Before Crowther could process what was happening, Derek stepped in close, dropped his weight, and threw the assassin over his hip. Crowther hit the reinforced floor hard. The impact drove the air from his breathing passages and sent a shock of pain through his exoskeleton. He'd been thrown before in training, but never that fast, never that smoothly. He rolled away immediately, his combat instincts screaming at him to create distance. Derek didn't pursue. The human just stood there, hands up in a relaxed guard position, bouncing slightly on the balls of his feet. He was smiling, actually smiling like this was fun. Come on, Derek said. Don't make this boring. Crowther felt anger flash through him. This human was mocking him, treating this like a game instead of fight to the death. Fine. He'd show this primitive creature what a real warrior could do. The assassin came in fast, using all 4 arms this time. High, low, middle strikes coming from multiple angles. It was a technique designed to overwhelm an opponent's defenses, to force them to choose which strike to block while the others landed. Against a 2-armed opponent, it was nearly unstoppable. Derek blocked 2 strikes, slipped under a third, and took the 4th one directly to his ribs. Crowther felt the impact connect, felt his fist drive into the human side with enough force to crack bone. That should have ended it, should have dropped Derek to his knees, gasping for air, clutching his broken ribs. Derek grunted, stepped back half a pace, then stepped right back in and drove a knee into Crowther's midsection. The pain was shocking. Humans were supposed to be fragile, soft, but that knee felt like it was made of steel. The assassin stumbled backward, his breathing ragged, trying to understand how a species without an exoskeleton could hit that hard. "You telegraph your strikes," Derek said, "still moving, still bouncing. Your upper arms dip slightly before you throw a punch. Makes you predictable." Crothar tried a grappling technique next. If striking wasn't working, he'd use his multiple limbs to control the human's body, lock him down, and choke him unconscious. He'd done this dozens of times in training against opponents who were specifically prepared for it. He got 3 of his 4 arms wrapped around Derek's torso and 1 arm. Perfect position. He began to squeeze, applying pressure to restrict the human's breathing and blood flow. This was basic combat theory. Control the body, control the fight. Derek's arm. The one Crothar didn't have locked down, moved in a way that shouldn't have been possible. The elbow bent backward, way past what Crothar thought was a human range of motion. Derek's hand found a pressure point on Crothar's lower left arm and squeezed. Lightning shot through the assassin's nervous system. His grip loosened involuntarily, and Derek twisted free like he was made of water. Then the human had Crothar in some kind of hold, one arm wrapped around the assassin's neck from behind, legs hooked around his torso. "Rear naked choke," Derek explained calmly, his voice right next to Crothar's auditory sensors. "You've got about 8 seconds before you pass out. Want to tap out?" Crothar threw himself backward, slamming Derek into the wall with all his strength. The human's grip loosened slightly, enough for the assassin to break free and scramble away. His neck hurt, his arm hurt, his ribs hurt, and only 4 minutes had passed. The fight continued. Crothar tried everything in his arsenal. Strike combinations that had won him sparring matches against the best fighters in his clan. Grappling sequences that were supposed to be unbreakable. Feints and misdirection designed to create openings. Nothing worked. Nothing stuck. Derek moved like he could predict every attack before it happened. When Crothar struck, the human blocked or dodged. When Crothar tried to grapple, Derek's joints moved in impossible directions to escape. And every time the assassin thought he had an advantage, Derek would counter with brutal efficiency. Worse than the pain, worse than the exhaustion setting in, was the smile. Derek never stopped smiling. He was enjoying this, actually having fun while systematically dismantling everything Crothar had been trained to do. For minutes, Jake called from the side. Crothar was breathing hard now, his exoskeleton cracked in 2 places, one of his eyes swelling shut from a punch he hadn't seen coming. Derek had a split lip, and that was it. One tiny injury compared to damage Crothar had accumulated. The assassin threw a desperate combination, putting everything he had left into one final push. Derek caught his upper right arm mid-strike, stepped in close, and did something with his body weight and leverage that Crothar's mind couldn't quite follow. There was sensation of movement, of the world flipping, and then Crothar was on the ground again with Derek controlling his arm. The human twisted, applying pressure in a direction that biology absolutely should not allow. Something in Crothar's shoulder joint popped, not a dislocation. Something worse. The kind of injury that would need medical attention and weeks of recovery. The pain was immediate and overwhelming. Crothar screamed. He couldn't help it. The sound came out high and sharp, nothing like the control warrior he'd been trained to be. "Time," Jake said. "Round 1 goes to Derek." The big human released the hold immediately and stood up, offering a hand to help Crothar to his feet. The assassin ignored it, rolling away and struggling upright on his own. His upper right arm hung useless, the shoulder joint damaged beyond any use in combat. 3 arms left, one eye swelling shut, breathing hard. And that was just round 1. The woman stepped forward next. Her name was Colleen, and she was smaller than Derek, but moved with a different kind of energy. Faster, more fluid. Where Derek had been like a freight train, methodical and unstoppable, Colleen moved like lightning. "I'll take it easy on you," she said, but her smile suggested otherwise. That same expression all 3 humans wore. Like this was the best part of their day. Crothar was already injured, one arm useless, vision compromised, breathing labored. But he was still a trained assassin, still genetically enhanced. Still had 3 functional arms against her 2. It wasn't enough. Colleen was faster than Derek, and she fought like she could read Crothar's mind. Every attack he attempted, she was already moving to counter it. Every defense he threw up, she found a way around it. And unlike Derek, who had fought with methodical precision, Colleen fought with joy. She laughed when she landed a particularly good strike. Actually laughed. 2 minutes into the second round, Crothar was on the ground again. Colleen's legs wrapped around his torso in some kind of crushing hold while her arms worked to control his remaining functional limbs. He couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything except tap his hand against the floor in surrender. Time, Jake called. Round 2 goes to Colleen. The third human, a man named Vincent, approached as Colleen helped Crothar to his feet. The assassin could barely stand. 2 arms useless now, one eye completely swollen shut, breathing ragged and painful. Everything hurt. Everything. Vincent looked at him with something that might have been pity. Or respect. Crothar couldn't tell anymore. "You can quit," Vincent said quietly. "No shame in it. You're already hurt pretty bad." Crothar looked at this human. Looked at Jake standing by the wall. Looked at the other 2 humans who just systematically destroyed everything he thought he knew about combat. For 4,000 years, the Velkari Shadow Clans had built their reputation on never surrendering, never yielding, never showing weakness. Warriors who would rather die than admit defeat. Crothar raised his remaining functional arm and tapped it against his chest. The universal signal for surrender. "I yield," he said. The medical team arrived within 90 seconds of Crothar's surrender. They were human, too, which somehow made sense given everything else that had happened tonight. A man and a woman wearing white uniforms with red cross symbols, carrying equipment that looked far more advanced than standard station medical gear. Crothar lay on the floor where he'd fallen, too exhausted and broken to even try standing anymore. His shoulders screamed with pain every time he breathed. His exoskeleton had cracks running through it in at least 4 places. One eye was completely swollen shut, the other barely functional. 2 of his 4 arms hung useless at his sides. He'd been in fights before, training accidents, a few close calls on previous contracts. But he'd never been beaten like this. Never been so completely and thoroughly dominated that his body simply gave up before his mind did. Jake Morrison walked over and knelt down beside him. The ambassador's suit was still pristine, not a wrinkle on it. He hadn't even participated in the fight, and somehow that made everything worse. He'd just watched while the security team dismantled a trained assassin, like it was a routine training exercise. "The medical team is going to patch you up," Jake said, his voice gentle now. Almost kind. "Nothing permanent. You'll heal. Might take a few weeks, but you'll be fine." The female medic was already scanning Crothar with some kind of handheld device, reading off numbers to her partner. The male medic started applying something to the worst of the cracks in the exoskeleton. It felt cool, soothing. The pain started to fade slightly. "Before we do that, though," Jake continued, "we need to talk about Article 48. You lost. That means you owe me information. Who hired you?" Crothar closed his one functional eye. His honor was already shattered. He'd surrendered in combat, something no Velkari warrior had done in living memory. What was one more betrayal added to that? What did honor even mean anymore when 3 unarmed humans had just proven everything he believed about himself was a lie? "The Korvax Empire," he said. His voice came out weak, broken, nothing like the proud warrior who'd entered this room an hour ago. Ambassador Thelvan specifically. He said the human vote on the contested territories needed to be removed from consideration. Jake nodded like he'd already known, but needed to hear confirmed. Payment method? Encrypted credit transfer. 20,000 galactic credits. Half up front, half on confirmation of death. Contact protocols? Crothar gave him everything. The communication frequencies, the dead drop locations, the code phrases. All of it, with each piece of information. He felt another part of his professional identity crack and fall away. He'd built his entire life around being the perfect assassin, untraceable, unstoppable, the shadow that targets never saw coming. Now he was just another failed contract, another cautionary tale other assassins would hear about and think they could do better. The medics worked while he talked, stabilizing his injuries, administering pain medication that made everything fuzzy around the edges. The male medic said something about needing to set the shoulder joint properly, and Crawdar felt a sharp pull followed by a pop and then blessed numbness as whatever painkiller they'd given him kicked in harder. "Thank you for your honesty," Jake said when Crawdar finished. "I know that wasn't easy." The ambassador stood up, brushing off his knees, and looked down at the broken assassin with an expression that Crawdar still couldn't quite read. Not anger, not satisfaction, something else entirely. "I want you to understand something," Jake said quietly. "This wasn't personal. You were doing your job. I get that. In another life, under different circumstances, you seem like someone who takes pride in their work. Someone who values professionalism. I can respect that." He paused, making sure Crawdar was paying attention despite the pain medication, making his thoughts swim. "But I need you to deliver a message for me. When you get back to whoever hired you, when you report that the contract failed, I need you to tell them something very specific." Crawdar managed a weak nod. "Tell them that humans spent 10,000 years learning how to hurt each other," Jake said. 10,000 years of documented history, and probably a lot longer than that if you count the stuff we didn't write down. We've fought wars that killed millions of our own people. We've invented thousands of different ways to cause harm, and we've gotten really, really good at all of them. Derek, Colleen, and Vincent were still in the room, now sitting casually against the wall like they just finished a light workout instead of dismantling a genetically enhanced assassin. They listened to Jake talk with the same relaxed attention. "Every martial art, every combat system, every fighting technique you saw tonight," Jake continued, "we didn't learn those from other species. We developed them ourselves. We created them to fight each other. Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, boxing, wrestling, judo, sambo, those are just a few of the systems we invented over the centuries, each one designed to exploit weaknesses in human anatomy, and each one tested through actual combat against other humans who were trying just as hard to win." The ambassador walked to his desk and picked up a small holographic projector. He activated it. An image appeared in the air. Earth, the blue and green planet, rotating slowly. "We joined the Galactic Council because we chose peace," Jake said, watching the image of his homeworld spin. "Not because we were incapable of war. We've had enough war to last us several lifetimes. We know what it costs. We know what it does to people, to societies, to entire civilizations. We've seen it up close and personal." He deactivated the projection and turned back to Crawdar. "But just because we chose peace doesn't mean we forgot how to fight. We remember every lesson. We keep every skill. We train our people in combat systems that are thousands of years old because we understand that peace only works when you're capable of defending it." The medics had finished their work. They were packing up their equipment, preparing to move Crawdar to a proper medical facility. The male medic gave Jake a nod, indicating the assassin was stable enough to transport. "Here's the important part," Jake said, leaning down one more time so Crawdar could hear him clearly despite the pain medication. "Tell the Korvax Empire, and anyone else who might be thinking about trying this again, that the next time they send an assassin after a human, they should send more than one, a lot more than one, because we've been preparing for this since the third attempt, and we're only going to get better at dealing with it." He stood up straight, adjusting his suit jacket one final time. "And tell them that humans don't forget who tries to kill us. We might be new to the Galactic Council, but we've been keeping grudges for millennia. We're very patient. We'll play the long game. We'll be diplomatic and professional and follow all the proper channels. But we will remember." The medics lifted Crawdar onto a floating stretcher. The movement sent fresh waves of pain through his body, despite the medication. He groaned, and the female medic adjusted something on her scanner, probably increasing the painkiller dosage. As they started moving him toward the door, Crawdar looked back at Jake one last time. The ambassador stood there in his simple gray suit, hands in his pockets, looking like any other mid-level diplomat in the galaxy. Nothing special, nothing threatening. But Crawdar knew better now. He understood what he was really looking at. Jake Morrison wasn't just a diplomat. He was a human, and humans, Crawdar now understood with perfect clarity, were the galaxy's apex predators wearing a thin veneer of civilization. They climbed to the top of their planet's food chain not through strength or speed or any single advantage, but through sheer stubborn persistence and an almost disturbing creativity when it came to violence. The galaxy had warned him. Everyone had warned him. Don't underestimate the humans. They're more dangerous than they look. They're unpredictable. They're crazy. Crawdar had thought it was exaggeration, propaganda, species bragging about themselves like everyone did. It wasn't. If anything, the warnings hadn't gone far enough. As the medics carried him out of the room and down the corridor toward the medical bay, Crawdar's mind kept replaying the fights. The way Derek had moved with impossible speed for someone so large. The way Colleen had seemed to predict his every move before he made it. The way Vincent had looked at him with something like pity, knowing the fight was already over before it began. They'd been playing with him. That's what hurt worse than any physical injury. Those three humans hadn't been fighting for their lives. They'd been practicing, training, having fun, the same way Crawdar might have practiced his blade work against a training dummy. And Jake had orchestrated the whole thing, turned a failed assassination attempt into a teaching moment, not just for Crawdar, but for whoever had hired him, a message delivered in the most direct way possible. The assassin would deliver that message. He had no choice. His honor was already broken. His reputation was destroyed. The least he could do was serve as a warning to others. Don't mess with the humans. Don't assume they're weak just because they're new to the council. Don't mistake their choice of peace for an inability to wage war. Because humans had spent millennia becoming the best of violence, survived all of it somehow, and then mostly decided to be friends with each other instead. But they never forgot how to fight. Never forgot a single technique or tactic or dirty trick. They'd learned in 10,000 years of warfare. They just chose not to use those skills, unless someone gave them a really good reason. Crawdar had given them that reason tonight, and he'd learned his lesson the hard way.